and welcome to another episode of Gaming the System with myself, Jem, Alex, and Matt. And today we are talking about gaming with your family, which, as we come up to Christmas, we thought might be quite appropriate, as that's a time that families get together, which can be a good or a bad thing for some of us. But either way, we wanted to have a chat about gaming with your family, our memories of it. Has it been a positive thing? Has it been a negative thing? Has it just been an impossible thing? And do we feel that going forward it's something that families should explore more? So firstly, I need to find my questions, and then we can start. So we've been having all sorts of technical dramas today, so you have to excuse us if we're a little bit frazzled. Right, so firstly I wanted to ask you both whether you have gamed with your family in the past, and we're specifically talking about computer games today, and because we've talked about board games in the past, and when I say family, that's extended family, so it doesn't just have to be, it doesn't have to be your whole family at once. It can be siblings or cousins or aunts, uncles, grandparents, parents, step parents, anyone who you view as family. So Alex, would you like to kick off?
Yes, I have video gamed with my family for probably many years, not every year exclusively, but I have a very strong memory from my childhood. I think it was one of the first games I ever played on PS2, and we got everyone playing it, and randomly enough it was World Rally Championship 2 Extreme. Mustn't forget the Extreme on the end there. And even my grandma played it. Basically, we set it up to start off on this one race. I think it was set in South America, so it was all very dusty and right on the cliffs and everything. And we'd all just decided to do a straight race, see who could get from start to finish fastest, and each take a turn. And we all had a go with the PS2 because it was all new and shiny, and obviously had to explain some of the controls to the older members of the family more than others, but it was probably one of the most fun things we've ever done. I don't think my grandma enjoyed it quite so much, because literally all she would do was drive straight forward from the start line and go straight off the cliff, because she didn't know how to turn. And it would be constantly just going off and respawning and going off and respawning, and we were all just basically wetting ourselves watching her get more and more frustrated, bless her, as she tried and failed to round. But yeah, that's one of my most vivid memories of gaming, particularly at Christmas time. There are other times as well, but I think perhaps one of the more accessible consoles in terms of family gaming for us was probably when the Wii was very popular when that first came out. We did a lot of Wii Sports together, and a lot of various other Wii things, like there was Wii Music as well. That one was an interesting one. And then even things like Mario Kart, and then also even Professor Layton as well. But obviously there were some limits as to how involved each family member could get in terms of controlling the game. They could input on the puzzles and or get involved that way though, which was slightly different. But yeah, we definitely do a lot of gaming together as a family, even when there are games we can all get involved with, definitely.
That sounds like really positive, happy memories of family gaming.
I think generally we're quite a competitive family, and most of the time it goes reasonably well.
I think when I was younger, when I first started gaming, we did, my mum used to get involved. My dad was never really, I mean, he didn't really like board games either, but my mum and my brother and I used to play games, and back then it was literally just the little texted ventures with the dodgy graphics, and it would be a lot about puzzle solving and stuff. So we would sort of get my mum in to help us, with a really difficult bit, and I do remember a lot, like playing games and then handing the controller to my brother, or getting my brother to do a bit that was particularly difficult, and that I would be good at doing a certain running and hiding bit, and he'd be good at doing a jumping onto the moving platforms bit. So it was really nice to sort of have that. But as we got older, we didn't have a console. We had I didn't have a console until I was an adult, so we just had the PC, and there was very little that, as games became more complex, there was very little that you could do together as a group. So gaming in my family sort of dropped off then. But then since I've got back into console playing, it's become more of a thing. Less so with my family, but when we got the virtual reality headset for the PlayStation, that was awesome. Everyone had a go on that, and it was hilarious that Christmas, because like even my dad was there. Like, and as I said, he wasn't really into that sort of thing, and he was trying to work out what was going on, and I think it's just really nice to have everyone have a laugh. And I think what you were saying, Alex, about the Wii, that sort of revolutionized, I think, gaming as a sort of social activity to play in the same physical space. So yeah, I think it's been something, and now gaming is a massive part of my family, and I mean, recently my husband has been playing Hades, and it's one of the few things that will drag my daughter off Roblox or whatever she's on at the moment, and she'll sit and watch him play, and she really loves it, and I'll walk in and they'll be like talking about all the latest levels that he's done and the latest armor and upgrades and all this, and she's getting really involved in it, but she doesn't play it. But when she was younger, they used to have so much fun playing Rayman together. So I think it is a really nice way to spend time with somebody, where you're sort of with them, but you're not having to talk at each other, you're just together. What about you, Matt? Have you got family gaming memories?
Mine's quite limited, and we'll come on to more of that with some of the other questions that you've got up. But the only real computer game times have been I did a 24-hour gaming marathon for raise money for charity, and played one of the Until Dawn style games a little bit with the family. I tried to get my mum into gaming a little bit a few years ago, but just didn't take,
right,
for reasons we'll come on to. But yeah, so it's gaming, computer gaming has really just been my thing.
No, sorry, excuse my cat. This is Lila. And she's cold. She really wants to cuddle. But I think we can all feel like that. She also goes quite nicely with my top today, so that's okay. One of the things that I wanted to talk about actually was about the sort of practical limitations, and the things like, understanding how to use a controller, like you were saying, your grandmother like just driving in a straight line, and I know, like, my dad was of a generation from pre-TV generation, so for him there was nothing natural about using a controller or even a keyboard, really. And I think there's also that sort of like moves into this idea about like, you know, technical knowledge, like understanding the basic concept of how a computer game works. And I know that we've been watching a YouTuber called Rasputin. I'll look it up. But he actually was trying to teach his girlfriend to game, and she'd never gamed, and so and he talks a lot about like how complicated it is when you've not done it for your whole life, you know, when it's a relatively new thing and you're coming into it as an adult with less time and less patience and all of that. And I think there's also issues around, you know, if people's actual physical abilities, like, you know, you're just the speed of some of the games, you know, that puts barriers in the way of people, especially if they don't have patience, or, you know, if they've got problems with their eyesight or hearing or mobility issues. I think, you know, then there's a whole, you know, we talk about games for people with all abilities a lot, and I think, you know, but I remember I picked up a newer version of Sonic the Hedgehog about 5 years ago. I know there's been more since then, and I just could not play it. I was like, there is no way. My reflexes were not quick enough to keep up with the information that was going on the screen, and I'm pretty sure I would have been fine when I was 12, but, you know, I just could not do it. I'm going to get another cat coming over in a minute. So anyway, Matt, do you have any thoughts on that, and the impact of those things on sharing these kind of games with your family?
Yeah, I'm thinking of it in terms of an analogy, because any kind of when it comes to controllers or keyboards, it's a physical skill that needs to be developed. And it's just like learning to drive people can drive a car fine, but then you've got to drive a lorry, and you've got to drive it on a journey through China, for example. That would be a completely alien universe but first you've got to learn, before you can learn the language of gaming, because there is a common theme of language that that's how games are built. And so you've got to get through the boring part of learning how to play. And if someone just isn't interested in that stage, then it's impossible to get to playing the game together normally. And yeah, so it's learning a new skill and a new language before you can even get to the business of actually playing the games.
Yeah.
And I find that's I think the following generations will find it easier and easier, because technology is so much more accessible to our generation and following generations, that it's easier for us to pick something up and put it down and have reference points. Yeah, but I think at the heart of it, the person that you're trying to play the game with needs to want it for themselves.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's no one enjoys it.
Yes, absolutely.
I think to add to that, there's a phrase, I don't know if it's still a thing in gaming marketing. I've heard before, like pick up and play. I don't know if you guys have heard that one before. But I often wonder how true that actually can be for a lot of games. Because obviously, like we've talked about, you need that base understanding of how gaming works and how controllers work. And then I guess that base understanding of the language of gaming as well.
Yeah.
And that's not always clear for a lot of people. I think I say simpler, like the easier a game is to just to get into and just get on with and understand, then I think the more accessible it will be for families as a whole. Trying to think of games that are the most accessible ones I've ever played. Probably something like the Wii, because you think of it, it's just basically a long stick. The stick, if you're playing Wii Sports, can act as your bat in baseball, your racket in tennis. That concept is quite easy to kind of take on board. And all you have to do is swing it around, and then the character will swing it around. So that's, in terms of getting into the game, is a relatively low start point. But for traditional control, I say traditional, I don't know if that's the right term, like a PlayStation controller or an Xbox controller, even I find it really difficult to make the jump between PlayStation and Xbox because I'm so used to playing on PlayStation. And then I get confused about like where the sticks are and where the buttons are and the names of the buttons. That's another thing. It's like, if someone says to me, press RB on an Xbox controller, I'll be like, well, is that the top or bottom? I don't know which one that is. So I guess there's a learning curve there as well. But I definitely think having that base knowledge is just going to unlock a whole plethora of games. Whereas not needing that base knowledge, there's only a limited amount of games that you could probably just pick up and play straight away as a complete like novice to gaming.
I think you just maybe think of like in terms of language, the language of gaming. If you understand, have a working knowledge of Latin, for example, that helps you with other languages. And if you speak French, then French, Spanish, Italian, they're extremely similar languages. And so you just need to, if you can learn one, so like if you learn how to play PlayStation, then the rules, the general rules of how games are played through a controller can be expanded to anything else with a controller. And then that would give you a rough idea of, oh, if I'm going to play a PC game, then whatever I do through a controller, there's a way to do it through a keyboard.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely right. I mean, with most hobbies or interests, there is a language and a set of rules and sort of like, I don't know, terms of engagement, really. And I think I think gaming is no different there. And I think it's I just looked him up. It's Razbutin, Razbuten, and it's really interesting watching his stuff because he's talking about exactly what we're talking about here. And I think it is really fascinating. And I think that there is, like you say, Matt, you have to have, somebody has to want to put the time in. And I think sometimes it's hard to get somebody who spent their whole life thinking that computer games are just something that teenage boys play, to take an interest in it. And I know so many people where the male partner games and the female one doesn't, and that happens in so many relationships. And I think, although I don't think everyone has to game, I think it's a shame that they don't play any games with each other, and I think that's a shame, because I do think actually that you can get quite a lot of out of it. So I think that's one of the things that I hope we're going to talk about in a bit more detail today.
One other thing you both mentioned, so I think at the heart of this is a question of how accessible games are. And the first message that people have been told their entire lives is that gaming is for other people. You're not meant to be gaming. That's a starting point of that education. And then so many games skip it would be good in an accessible way if every single game developer started with the premise that someone's going to want to pick up this game and play it who's never played a game before, and give them the support for that. Just say at the start, this is quite a complex game. We can walk you through it at a different pace.
Yeah.
If you want. And thinking about learning a little bit about programming, in the fact that everything boils down to zeros and ones, which still blows my mind. And the creativity that people put into them making the games, they need to be just as ambitious in terms of how accessible they make them.
Absolutely.
So with like the driving game, there are I've got a cousin who works as I think he's a Formula One like pit crew engineer, and he plays driving games, and there are just a billion things that you can change. The amount of complexity is staggering, but there's no reason why a 80-year-old grandmother who's never gamed before couldn't pick it up and go, you can have a setting where it's literally accelerate and turn left and right. And they might find tremendous joy and satisfaction in that.
Yeah.
But it just takes the creativity and the getting the head out of the arse that a lot of game developers need.
Yeah, it's that sort of elitism, isn't it, that's going on there, and I think I wonder if we are beginning to see a movement in that direction, because I've played quite a lot of games recently where they do like difficulty levels, and story mode is one of them now, and so there's you can just play the game just to enjoy the environment. And I think that's really, really positive and I'm hoping, like you say, that they could really simplify games and just bring it right down to, and then make it, I mean, I'm playing Disney something Valley. I can never remember what it's called. And at the moment, and Disney Dreamlight Valley. And it's an excellent game for kids because it's got all of the Disney characters in it. It's very safe to play. It's you're running around, you do little tasks. It's all very simple, very easy. You're building up, it's collectibles, all of those things. The biggest problem is that it's not voiced. So all of everything, when you talk to people, you have to read it, which means that it immediately drops out, any child under the age of sort of 6, 7 or up. And, because even if they can read, which, they will be able to read by that point, but, are they going to sit down and read a big chunk of text? Are they going to sit and read a 2-minute conversation? Probably not. And all they need is to have voiceovers for that. And I think a company like Disney can definitely afford to do that. And and they have sort of sound effects of the characters. They just haven't bothered to voice it. And it's such a shame, because it just takes out a whole group of kids that, would actually benefit from what is effectively a really fun little game. I think,
It's reminded me of the very early Spyros when you used to talk to Spyrax, and it would just be the little dragonfly, and it would just like me, and then it would just be all the text that you'd have to read through. But I don't know whether that was a cost issue. Like you say, you'd expect someone like Disney to have the money to pay voice actors to let them read the lines. But I never thought of it like that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Right.
There's one.
Sorry, go on, Matt.
Quick thing. The most awesome, like playing The Last of Us Part 2 and the remake of the first one, with the probably the most accessible game duo that's ever been made. And one of the most groundbreaking things in that is that you can slow down time. You can and it's completely binary. So you can slow down and it will be slow no matter what happens in the game, cutscenes, fighting, all of it. It's just black and white, slow down time and normal time. And that there is absolutely no reason why that shouldn't be a standard feature in any game, because there's no excuse for it, because it literally cuts the processing weight in half. So there is no game that has ever existed that cannot be played at a slower speed. And you think how many, not only would it make gaming so much more accessible to people, because it'll go, you could cut it down to 25% the speed, and then you could learn, oh, I have to press this button here and that button there and here. And all you're saying, just I'd never thought about, because I have subtitles and everything, and I tend to read through them quickly. But yeah, if you think of all little elements like that that are cutting out people, and there should be like a gold standard of everything can be customized, like literally everything you can think of can be customized. There's definitely the resources out there for someone to make that. But I really do think that the ego of the creators is a real impediment to having those kinds of changes, because I've made this seem just like this. I don't want them to be able to slow it down, because that will ruin my art. Let's go.
It's the whole, this is the way we've always done it, why do we need to change kind of thing, isn't it? You know, it's very hard to get yourself out of that mindset if it's been a formula that works for so long for you. I can imagine getting yourself to that place thinking, oh, it's actually okay to do things differently, is quite a big risk for a lot of people involved in making a game. But it's something they need to push themselves to do more of, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, this as so many of these issues, you know, we talk about things that aren't necessarily specifically related to equality, and we almost always end up coming around to, you know, how we can actually improve on these things. And I think, you know, when we've talked about making these things more accessible and making them more open to different audiences, and I think, you know, I mean, the reading thing obviously doesn't only affect, you know, small children, it affects people from all walks of life and all ages. So, you know, it's and I think what's frustrating about these things, and I think, you know, you touched on this a bit, Matt, is that, you know, the big companies have the time and the money and the people to be able to put these facilities in, but often you find it's the smaller studios that are actually putting this stuff in, and they're actually the ones who take the time to get in the voice actors or put in the little added extras, because, and I mean, you know, I don't know this for sure, but I would guess it's because they're doing it for love, really. You know, they're making a game that you know is their masterpiece, as opposed to the larger companies who are just making a game, you know, to roll in the next lot of funding and you know, make money. And I think there is a difference there. And I think it's that hopefully, as more of these smaller studios put out games that are successful, people will realize that actually they can start demanding these kind of more tailored games and yeah, all of these additional things. I think that would be good. So what do you think there's any issues with any problems with gaming with your family? I mean, can you know, obviously aside from the obvious one of, you know, the Monopoly fallout and things like that we are, I mean, I know that just translates from whatever you're going to. Can you think of anything that you think, you know, is a sort of reason not to game with family? Alex?
I think, like you say, I guess the obvious one is like any potential fallout. If you've got like someone who might be a bad loser or someone who just doesn't feel like they can enjoy it as much as everyone else, or an argument starts over like whether someone was cheating, that kind of thing. But in terms of other things, yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there are other things, but I cannot think of them currently. But I'm sure once we talk about it more, I can interject. I guess perhaps some family members just feeling like it's not something they're allowed to do or that is for them, and then feeling kind of isolated in that way, perhaps. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I would hope that there are more positive than negative experiences, but or even to do with like the cost of gaming, perhaps, like feeling pressured to maybe buy a certain game so that everyone can play it, but actually maybe not being able to, if we think about the cost of living, I guess this year especially, there might be problems with kids saying, oh, well, Trudy from my class has got this game, why can't we get it?
Yeah.
That kind of, I don't know why I use the name Trudy. It's not a very modern name. But yeah, that kind, I guess that's a problem for any kind of present though, for kids and families anyway. But
yeah, I think that's a really valid point. And also I think it's, we're talking about technical challenges, but we've had things where we've wanted to play a game as a family on our different PCs, and then you have to buy 3 copies of the game. And that has stopped us from playing games in the past. So again, that's something that it'd be nice to have more family accounts and things for that. So Matt, what about you? Can you think of any reasons not to game as a family?
I think it comes down to, I think so many people, especially with families, feel so much arbitrary pressure to do things a certain way, play certain things, interact in certain ways. And I think the best thing that families can do is to think about what kind of patterns that they've been brought up to think these kinds of family occasions are meant to be, and then go, well, what do we want them to be? And if it turns out that a grandparent has gone, I love playing Snap. I've played it for forever and ever and ever, and I haven't played in such a long time. And you go, okay, let's play Snap. And then you might have tremendous fun doing that when you think, oh, we should be playing Monopoly. So I think the biggest pitfall is doing things that you don't want to do, doing things that you don't enjoy, doing things that you feel you're obligated to because of arbitrary tradition, when we know that tradition is one of the swords of the patriarchy.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I hate people feeling, because there's so much pressure, genuine, real world pressure on everyone all the time. And I just hate people feeling obligated to, because if you don't want to play a game and you go, okay, that's fine, that's completely fine. And I just want people to be happy. That's all I want. And that's my positive and negative assessment.
Brilliant.